Last week, we talked about the social fade. How men in midlife lose their connections so slowly they don't even notice. Today, I want to go somewhere a little bit harder. When was the last time someone asked you how you're really doing? And when did you actually tell them the truth? Not, I'm fine, not, I'm just hanging in there. The actual truth about what's going on inside. For most men, the answer is, I can't remember. Not because nobody asked, but because somewhere along the way, we learn the correct answer is always, I'm fine. Even when we're not. Especially when we're not. That silence has a name. I call it the emotional fade, and it's one of the most dangerous things happening to men right now. Let me give you some numbers that should be front page news, but aren't. Men account for roughly 80% of suicides in the US. That's not a typo, 4 out of 5. In the highest risk group, men aged 45 to 65. The exact men I'm talking to on this podcast. Yet us men are significantly less likely than women to seek professional help for depression, anxiety, or emotional distress. Instead, as men, we self-medicate with alcohol, with overwork, with risk-taking behavior, anything to actually avoid talking about what's happening inside. And here's what makes it even harder to see. Depression in men often doesn't look like what we expect. It doesn't always show up as sadness, it shows up as irritability. Anger, recklessness, withdrawal, numbness, a man can be severely depressed and never shed a tear because he's been trained not to. We don't talk about men's mental health because men don't talk about their mental health. The silence feeds itself. So where does this come from? Why do men go quiet when they're struggling? The message starts early. Boys learn quickly when emotions are acceptable. Anger is tolerated, everything else is suspicious. Be a man, man up, don't be soft. These aren't just phrases, they're programming. And by adulthood, many of us men have a vocabulary of about 3 emotions. Fine, angry, and tired. Researchers have found that boys in early adolescence actually have deep, intimate friendships. They share secrets, they're vulnerable with each other. They talk about real things, but as they get older and absorb cultural expectations about what it means to be a man, they abandon those friendships. They learn that closeness is weakness, that needing someone is soft. Now add the midlife amplifiers. You got men with a limited emotional vocabulary combined with the social fade we talked about last week. So they can't name what they feel, and they have no one to tell even if they could. Professional identity gets tied to performance. So admitting struggle feels like admitting failure. Then there's the provider pressure. My family depends on me, so I don't get to fall apart. And the generation of men now in midlife largely grew up with fathers who modeled emotional suppression as strength. We learned by watching. The emotional fade isn't just feeling bad. It's not giving yourself permission to feel and express the deeper stuff. It's going numb and calling it being strong. Let me describe someone. Tell me if you recognize him. He's the guy who crushes it at work. He coaches his kids' team. He keeps the yard looking good, but he hasn't slept well in 2 years. He wakes up at 3 a.m. with his mind racing about things he can't control, and he never mentions it to anyone. He's the guy who used to have hobbies. He used to fish or golf or tinker in the garage, and somewhere along the way he just stopped. If you asked him why, he couldn't tell you, but he'd probably say he's just busy. He's a guy whose temper has gotten a little shorter, whose patience has grown a little thinner. He snaps at his wife over nothing. He's harder on his kids than he means to be, and afterward he feels bad. But he doesn't know how to talk about it, so he just apologizes and moves on. He's the guy who drinks a couple more beers than he used to every night, not to party, but just to take the edge off. Just to quiet the noise in his head and enough to fall asleep. He's the guy who sits in his car in the driveway for 10 minutes before going inside. Not because he doesn't love his family, but because he needs a moment to put his game face on, to become the version of himself that everyone else needs him to be. None of these men think they have a mental health problem. They think they're just tired, or stressed, or getting older. But what they're describing, what they're living, it's the emotional fade in action. And the worst part, most of them are surrounded by people who have no idea anything is wrong, because they've gotten very, very good at hiding it. I'm not a therapist, I'm a trainer, but I've watched men's lives change when they start taking their inner feelings as seriously as their outer life. So here's what I know works. First, you just gotta name it. Just saying I'm not okay, even if it's only to yourself, is the first act of defiance against the emotional fade. You can't fight what you won't acknowledge. Second, you gotta talk to somebody. A therapist, a counselor, a pastor, a friend. The specific person matters less than the act of opening your mouth. I know that feels like the hardest thing in the world, and that's exactly why it matters. And third, move your body. Exercise is not a replacement for professional help, But the research is overwhelming. Physical activity, especially strength training, has significant effects on depression and anxiety. It's not a cure, but it's a weapon, and a warrior needs every weapon he can get. Fourth, build structure around your mental health the same way you'd build a training program. You schedule it, you protect it. This isn't soft, this is strategic. And fifth, watch support in other men. If you see a guy fading, say something. Ask him how he's actually doing, and then shut up and listen. You might be the only person who actually does. But here's the thing I've learned, and this might be the most important part. All of those steps I just mentioned, they work better when they're in service of something, when you have a reason to fight. Arthur Brooks writes in his book From Strength to Strength that the second half of life requires a different kind of purpose than the first half. The goals that drove you in your 20s and 30s, building, achieving, proving yourself, those start to feel a little hollow. And if you don't find a new purpose, you drift. You start to fade. Robert Bly put it another way in his book Iron John. He said a true warrior serves a purpose greater than himself, a transcendent cause. But if there's no worthy king to serve, if a man is just grinding for money or status or ego, he's not a warrior anymore. He's just a soldier, and soldiers burn out. Warriors don't. So I'll add a sixth thing to the list. Find something worth fighting for. Something bigger than your comfort. Something that makes the struggle mean something. That might be your faith. It might be your family. Not just providing for them, but being present with them. It might be your community, or a cause, or the men coming up behind you who need what you've learned. The emotional fade wins when life feels pointless. Purpose is how you punch back. Fighting the emotional fade doesn't mean performing happiness. It means refusing to go numb. It means choosing honesty over I'm fine, and it means being a man who's strong enough to admit when he's struggling, and brave enough to do something about it. So if anything I've described today sounds familiar, if you recognize yourself in any of those scenarios, I want you to know two things. First, you're not alone. Millions of men are fighting the same battle, including me. The emotional fate doesn't discriminate. It comes for all of us at some point. Second, it doesn't have to stay this way. The fate is not inevitable. It's something you can fight. But you have to choose to fight it. Nobody's coming to save you, and that's not me being harsh. That's me being honest. You have to make the first move. Next week, we're going to talk about something connected to everything we've discussed so far. Identity. What does it mean to be a man right now? The culture is louder than ever about what masculinity should and shouldn't be. And most of it's noise. I think men deserve a better definition of strength. One that includes the kind of honesty that we talked about today. That episode is called Reclaiming Masculinity. So I'll see you then. My name's Jonathan. This is Against the Fade. Don't fade. And one more thing. If you know someone who is struggling, really struggling, the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline is available 24/7. All you have to do is call or text 988. There's no shame in reaching out. That's not a weakness. That's a man refusing to fade alone.